Protein, everything the body needs.
You eat when you want, what you want, and how you want.
Protein pizza burrito time. I wanted to start this session because there's obviously a lot of confusion when it comes to refeeds. A lot of people assume that it's it's an excuse to binge eat whatever they want. They may put too much focus on the actual refeed day versus the actual diet. May think that a refeed is ideal in a surplus, which I don't really think it is, but it could be. I have a few topics, so I guess maybe I could just kind of list them off and we can just go from there. If that's cool with you guys.
All right.
So, okay. Trench and Aaron are coming. So maybe we just
fantastic.
This is good because I think Trench will be able to give us the history, because this is basically stems from the anabolic diet. That's what it was called, right?
There's body opus. Refeeds will occur or should occur on any diet where you're having a deficit for a prolonged time, but specifically the refeeds, the cyclical keto, was Body Opus by Dan Duchesne, which is the first one. And then you have the anabolic diet by Mauro Di Pasquale, who was basically the same thing. It was a cyclical ketogenic diet where they would refeed on the weekends. Because there's a different approach when you're doing a standard refeed. So there's a standard refeed when someone's just dieting, regardless if they're doing keto or not, in terms of leptin, sort of bringing your metabolism up, getting you to feel better. But when it specifically comes to people who are doing a ketogenic diet, who are doing a higher fat approach to a ketogenic diet, in particular those individuals who are sedentary or whose activity isn't as glycogen depleting as the four of us are, or the six of us, I should say, those individuals should not be doing a refeed with high carbs. And the reason is simple. When you're in ketosis and you're not physically active, especially if you're doing half-fat keto, you are insulin resistant. Okay, it's physiological insulin resistance, so it's not permanent. It's not pathological per se, but somebody who's practicing high-fat keto and who's not exercising hard the way we would, if they were to eat carbohydrates, they would probably fail a glucose tolerance test. In other words, they'll behave like a diabetic. So we'll have people that will often ask, I want to reintroduce a carb day. They're not very active. They just want to binge on carbs. They will just throw their blood markers right off. And typically you'll see people feel like shit afterwards. Yeah. So if you are doing a high-fat keto approach and you are not exercising hard, you probably do not want to do a heavy carb refeed day because you will be insulin resistant. They should probably introduce carbs on the lower glycemic scale at a much smaller volume. So I would say maybe have 50, 75 grams of carbs in one day via foods or carbohydrates that are higher in fiber. I absolutely wouldn't recommend those individuals start pounding back sugar or higher glycemic carbohydrates. And I definitely wouldn't recommend those individuals, as of course you would all know, to do a carb up the way we would in a cyclical ketogenic diet approach, where we do that glycogen depletion workout prior to that. If you want to reintroduce carbs, that's fine. I would do it very conservatively, to say the least, for those individuals.
Okay, cool. Thanks for that. What is a depletion workout? Why would that be necessary for someone that is active, for someone that is following a higher protein?
What would be the purpose of a depletion workout?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You should be depleting glycogen throughout the entire week, such that when you then add a depletion workout, when you consume carbohydrates, it really comes down to where you partition those nutrients. First of all, it's an extremely intense workout, so you deplete a lot of glycogen. And then when you consume glycogen or carbohydrates, you replenish the glycogen you've lost. But you can't, and it triggers something that's called supercompensation, which you can actually load up your muscle with disproportionately more glycogen than you otherwise could without doing such a severely intense depletion style workout, which, by the way, most people probably don't do it hard enough. And you'll know when you do it. You'll find that balance between how much exercise you do, how intense you go, and then how many carbs you load up. As I mentioned before, the people who are sedentary and who aren't depleting glycogen, they're down regulating. Not to get too much into the weeds, but they're downregulating pyruvate dehydrogenase. They're not really activating the glycolytic pathway. So when they consume carbohydrates, they'll just spike blood glucose. But if you keep the glycolytic pathway open, such as I do and everyone in this group discussion does, such as Trinch does, and all the people who practice sort of our high intensity training, the glycolytic pathway doesn't get downregulated. It's still very active. So this is why people like us, despite the fact that we're doing keto, we can still consume quite a bit of carbohydrates and not behave with that physiological insulin resistance that I had talked about earlier. So
Right.
even without the depletion workout, even if we just train normally and we would have a little bit of carbs, we wouldn't fail the glucose tolerance test. And the reason is we're keeping the glycolytic pathway open.
Trench, do you mind, since you're here, and do you mind giving us some background of, you started this way back in the 90s, and you stuck to it. So obviously it's a way to adhere to a diet. Could you give us some history of like how you found out about, refeeds and the cyclical keto approach?
I want to say the first time, I think, was when Vince McMahon created his own bodybuilding federation. And he was talking about how these guys are doing this anabolic diet. And I'll never forget, I was driving, I knew exactly where I was in my car in my town when I was listening to the radio. And I was like, I don't think I could do that diet because I don't know how people are going to McDonald's and losing weight. Like, that's what I thought they were doing. I couldn't understand. I was like, I don't think I can do that. But then I started researching it, and I got a book, and it might have been his book. It had some ring binders on it, and it might have been the anabolic. Again, we're going back to the early 90s. And anyway, I started dabbling with that before I did Atkins and before I did CKD and then Body Opus. But whether I knew the science or not, it was working, at least for me, for a couple of reasons. I was so afraid of the carb days that I wouldn't go overboard. So, I was only doing like 150 to 200 grams, versus nowadays where it's like 700, 800, 900. But
like one meal, Trench.
Yeah, seriously, it was like one meal. It was like lunch.
Yeah.
And at my heyday, I was doing 1,200 grams, and I was forcing myself, and that's when I was doing Body Opus. And back then, this is way before Facebook, or, we used to have internet news groups. And it was a very weird setup. And I knew all the famous gurus back then, and we would email each other back and forth. This is back when we had a 4K modem. It was ridiculous. And I remember emailing Dan like in the middle of the night. And I said, Dan, this is crazy. Can't get up every hour. I set my clock every hour. And I would drink a Carbo Force. And I'm like, this is crazy. Well, I can't do this. It's not my body type. It's not, why would I need to do all this? He goes, you really don't have to. He goes, after I wrote the book, did some further research. He goes, all that stuff was used in endurance athletes. You don't have to do that. You can probably consume half the carbs. And that's what I started doing. So then I brought it down to like 500, 600, 700 grams. And like you had said, Mark, if you do it with precision, and, don't sneak in a peanut butter cup here and there, you're going to wake up looking phenomenal.
Yeah.
And most people don't do it that perfect. And even I don't do it that perfect, because I will go for that peanut butter cup because I think, what the hell? And sometimes it's another one. So, again, I lost a lot of weight doing this. And even when I wasn't keto for a while, I would always do like, I don't even want to call it a cheat day. It was just literally every week, on a Saturday night, I get a small pizza. I would eat the whole thing. But my diet during the week was precise, like flawless. Like if I screwed up my diet during the week, I didn't get that pizza on a Saturday. But if I didn't do something after a few weeks, then my weight would stall. So I would have this pizza, and then I said, I really want to stick with keto forever. So that's really when I just started doing the CKD, and that's where I had met Lyle McDonald in those news groups. And we're going back to mid to late 90s, maybe 98, 99, and way before he wrote his book. And that's when we started doing it. Like, you look at all the keto groups today, I would say 90% of them are not carbing up. back then, these keto news groups and these keto email lists, they were called, 90% were doing carbs. It was
Yeah.
weird. It was very weird. And these were regular people. These weren't all bodybuilders. These are your average Joes. They were carbing up all the time. And they weren't obscene about it.
Yeah. I think it all back. So you did cyclical keto long before I did, but I remember I was in some news groups as well.
Right.
But even the people that did keto, they did it as sort of, as we know, for nutrient partitioning, and they never ever feared carbohydrates.
Right.
What's happened now is that it's become this orthorexia with keto, because people began to fear carbs. Sugar is bad. Aspartame will give you brain cancer, and obsession with ketones and this orthorexic approach to food and carbs being bad, which is not how I ever knew keto used to be. Now, I did fall into that downward spiral, and you, Mike, fucking smacked me in the face, like, what are you doing? And you straightened me out, and I had a little bit of a, I'm like, oh, thanks for pulling me out of that really dark, crazy place. So I've been there. But that sort of, and this is why keto gets a bad name, it's because it develops these abnormal eating behaviors, or this fear of food. Whereas the keto that you know, and the keto that you've been doing, the keto that we all do now, it's that carbs are a tool. And there's just nothing wrong with carbs. And the current keto community doesn't do that. They chase ketones. They're very carb phobic. And so when you talk about a refeed day, some people use the term cheat day. I understand why that might have a negative connotation to it. But a refeed day with carbohydrates, it's a bonus. It will help you with performance. And if you're dieting for a long period of time, and your performance will always go down over time if you're constantly dieting without giving you a break. And if you can refeed and increase performance and have periods where you're stabilizing your performance or even increasing it, and it's just all positive in the long run. So it's the weird keto groups now, and they're huge, that follow that insane way.
There's a purpose for the refeed, but a lot of it is psychological. It keeps you going for the next week or the next 2 weeks. You know, you get people that after a couple of weeks are like, oh, can I cheat on my keto? I'm like, but you know, you just started and you've been heavy for your whole life. You know, and it's like, and a lot of these keto people, they're in keto prison. They feel like, oh, you can't do that. And they're being told by these wannabe gurus on the internet, why do you got to do a carb day? Why not? As long as you don't go overboard. You know, I was very strict during the week with my keto, very strict. If you did good for the past 5 to 10 days, you get to enjoy. Versus I watch these keto people in these groups and they're like suffering, and like it's almost like the people pushing this nonsense are afraid to lose something. Are they losing clientele? Are they losing credibility? Are they losing the fact that maybe carbs are kind of required on this diet? I don't care what type of diet it is. Having a day where you go off plan, which is actually on plan, the off plan, just keeps you on that diet so you don't feel like you're in this dieting phase forever. You know, and if that day is a day where you're going to like a wedding or something, then so be it.
You guys raised an excellent point about refeeds, that there needs to be some sort of basic understanding, as Mark, as you put it before, the energy content of food.
So
go ahead.
Sorry, Kala.
Well, I was just going to say, like, you know, like bringing this idea to someone that's just starting out 2 weeks dieting, they're bound to just screw up because they haven't even set up a structure, let alone a rhythm, as you put, Mike, of or, you know, being strict every day and then all of a sudden going off grid. If you don't have that understanding of, you know, what the nutrient content of food, let alone energy content of food, you're set up for disaster. So that's definitely an excellent point. Just wanted to kind of highlight there.
Yeah, one thing Mike certainly knows is that when Mike does a cheat day, and me and you and people in this group, I think when we refer to cheat day, I think it's probably more accurate to say that it's a refeed day, because I would say that cheat days are single-handedly more responsible for more weight loss stalls or weight gain and unsuccessful diets than anything. So people, you can only establish, you can eat, theoretically, you can eat an unlimited amount of calories in a day, but you can only eat 0. You can't eat less than 0. So regardless of how low you bring your calories down, there's a limit to how low you can go, but there is no limit to how much you can eat on the weekend. And you can entirely blow a week's deficit in one. I can do it in one meal. Not everyone's a binger like me, but you can do it in one day very easily. So for us, we understand the energy density of foods. We understand calorie content. So when we do a cheat day, which there's better terms for, we'll say a refeed day, we understand when Mike does a refeed day, cheat day, I guarantee you he's not sitting there just binge eating. He knows, he has a more approximate idea of what the calories are. And he's gotten so good that he probably doesn't even have to track calories. His meals are so consistent. He knows his food groups, that he knows where it's at. So when he has a cheat day, it's not what somebody else would do as a cheat day, which is to just have the weekends off. They go out with their friends, they crush some chicken wings and some beer, or they have some other food, and then they blow the entire week's deficit in one day or in a weekend. Or even worse, they've overshot their deficit. So technically, they are gaining weight. And then, of course, what happens on Monday? Monday, you're like, oh, I've got to offset what I did this past weekend. And that is the hardest time to try and eat clean again after you've had a weekend of binge eating where you spiked sugar all weekend and now you're going to try and fast on a Monday. It's extremely hard if you've been doing, like Mike says, high sugar, high fat content foods. You're going to feel like crap the Monday. And your appetite is going to be through the roof and you're going to have a hard time bringing it in. It's not an excuse to just have whatever you want all weekend long. But if you want to go ahead and you know approximately where your calories are, you can certainly relax on the weekend. But to the people who are starting out, you know, people will often say to me, oh, I don't want to count calories. And I tell them, you learn to count calories, so eventually you don't have to.
You kind of develop these meals that you start to love. You create like this structure where you basically are like eating the same foods over and over again. Mike, you got a meaty mountain like every Monday or whatever. And it's like, you know, I think we all have like our staple foods because we tracked and we now know, okay, I know this works, so I'm going to use it. I like it. Why would I start having other foods?
Yeah. Or if you're at a wedding and you're just like, oh, I want to eat something. Well, I know that slice of cheesecake is probably 1,000 friggin' calories. So when you have at least a rough idea of to just how bad or how calorically dense certain foods can be, even just a rough idea, you know, knowledge is power. And if you have an idea of that, then you can make better decisions. When you don't realize that a chocolate chip cookie, that big one, is 260 calories, when you think it's like 100 calories and you eat it, no. That's why people screw up. They have no idea of the amount of calories that they're putting in their mouth. And I think that I've said this to you before, Calvin, when we've talked before. There's things that I think that we should learn in school. How to change a tire, how to balance a checkbook, how to swim, first aid, CPR, and the energy content of foods. These are things that should be taught to people in high school coming out the gate.
Lynn, I kind of want to hear from you too. You know, you've been practicing refeeds. It does help in recovery as well. You know, maybe do you mind sharing some of your experience with refeeds?
December, I had a surgery, and then in January, I had PRP in both my hips. In the December timeframe and first week of January, I couldn't work upper body, but then I started hitting upper body really hard, and I was just feeling absolutely tanked at the end of every workout. And I thought, okay, I've got to do a refeed. So did a depletion workout the best I could, but I was already so freaking depleted. It wasn't like I normally would do. Did my refeed, and the next day I felt like I could have killed anything. I looked stronger. My muscles were filled out. My veins were popping. And I worked out hard that day.
Right.
I wasn't really planning on working out on Sunday, but I did. I just went into the gym and I felt great. So that really helped with my recovery, coming out of a surgery and a procedure within a few weeks of each other. So that's my more recent experience. You know, historically, I feel so much stronger in the gym, and I cycle between doing strength training and doing hypertrophy training. So it helps. The refeeds really help me, particularly when I'm doing strength training, and I can, week over week, I'm still adding weight to the bar and feeling really strong. So they're imperative, you know, to that when I'm doing strength.
Yeah, absolutely. I can totally relate. I feel the same way. The next day, you know, a lot of people, you know, are advised not to train after a refeed, but I always feel a lot stronger, and I kind of push my limits after that surplus of calories, and it always helps my performance. So that alone in a mindset point of view, you know, keeps me motivated there as well.
But Cal, you mentioned refeeds for people that don't do keto. That's those of us in this current conversation. We're sort of unique insofar as we're kind of all a little bit spun. And what I mean when I say that is we tend to do things pretty hardcore. And I think, you know, I know Mike is, you, me, everyone in this group, obviously we're all here for a reason, is we have a similar mindset, which is if I feel okay and I think I can get a workout in, I'll probably go do a workout. When it comes to refeeds, we tend to go harder in a deficit and push longer before we refeed. They did a Matador study, which is basically they look at diets, and we know that the longer you diet, the longer you're in a deficit, the more muscle you risk losing. And as you get leaner, a greater percentage of your weight loss is going to come from muscle than it will from fat. Initially, when you're overweight and you have a lot of fat to burn, most of your weight loss comes from fat. As you diet longer, as you get leaner, that weight loss tends to skew slightly more towards muscle than it does fat. The way that the evidence shows to combat that is adequate protein, excellent hard resistance training, and of course refeeds. So they did the Matador study, which is they fed people a deficit for a period of time with the same amount of time of maintenance. And they found that those people at the end had lost more weight from fat versus muscle than the people who took less dietary breaks. Having these carb up days or these refeed days to people that have been on a prolonged deficit is that when you're in a prolonged deficit, you simply burn out. Your body, your metabolism does slow down. It's adaptive thermogenesis. It does happen. You become lethargic and your performance declines. It levels out and it declines. And by incorporating carb days and refeed days, you feel better and you perform better. And that increases in the long term the net results that you're looking for. There needs to be periods in which they come up to maintenance calories in order to reset certain hormones, leptin, ghrelin, so on and so forth. The single most important thing when it comes to combating adaptation is the hormone leptin. Virtually everything that happens when a person's been at a deficit for a long period of time, thyroid going down, for males, testosterone going down, ghrelin going up, all those things are downstream effects of a decrease in leptin. And the more fat we lose on a diet, the lower leptin gets. And in order to help reset that, we need to have a period of time where we're back to maintenance calories. That helps reset leptin and it helps reset their mood. Minimizing those effects for periods of time during a prolonged dieting phase ensures adherence, reduces lean tissue loss, and improves performance. So I think refeeds are something that everybody should consider. Just let's not call them the misnomer of calling them a cheat day, which gives people the idea that they can just go ahead and eat whatever they want, because that's just going to backfire. And then they're going to get fed up and they're going to be heartbroken.
It's all good, man. It's been really informative. So thank you so much, guys. Hope you're all doing well. It's nice to see you, by the way.
Yeah.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, for sure.
You too.
You guys take care.
All right. Take care.
Okay.
Bye.
Yeah.